was sitting here thinking, I wonder when Dominick's going to get here. Better check in with him to make sure he's. I didn't recognize you with a mustache. Let me get you unmuted here. Get a few more people in here. I gotta unmute you. Let's see here. Sandy, come on in here. There we go.
Hey, how's that? Can you hear me now?
You can see you looking good.
Hey, man, thanks. You too, buddy. I like your hat.
Thank you. That's the cat hat there. My wife got that for me.
Nice. You got an extra set of eyes up there.
That's
And
right.
ears, it looks like.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
always good.
Yeah, we're big on the cat medicine. Are you a cat person or a dog person?
I've always kind of associated more with the dog side, but I'm trying to be more open to the cat side of life these days. There's actually a real sweet stray in our neighborhood, a bunch of them actually, but there's one in particular, this gray one with these real cool looking eyes that always kind of wanders by and says hello, and he'll even like curl around my leg and everything. And so that I think he's maybe helping me develop more of a soft spot.
I dig that. They're wonderful teachers. Yeah. So you're in Nashville, hey?
That's right.
Excellent. And you've been there what, 2 or 3 years longer?
It's been a little over 3 years now, man. It's just kind of flown right by.
And you live there with your wife Phoebe Hunt?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's she up to today?
So she's always busy with a million different things. Currently, one of her big projects is this thing called Ukulele Sprouts.
Hmm.
Originally, she just started basically doing ukulele lessons for young children, and
Beautiful.
then realized that it would be more effective for her to actually train the parents how to become the ukulele teachers, so then they could sort of go out and spread this in their own communities, and
Wow.
she wouldn't have to be the teacher for literally every course,
Wow.
etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's spreading the gospel of the ukulele, and hoping that it'll eventually lead to something else, like it did with me and a lot of other folks.
Did you? And that's brilliant because ukulele is so practical and handy and sounds so good, and you can play so much music on it. Of course, leads to mandolin easy and guitar. Did you start off on ukulele or where'd you start?
I did actually, and
Nice.
it was not the traditional uke tuning. It was tuned like the high four strings of a guitar. So I was kind of starting out with like half of a guitar under my fingers, and my dad kind of taught me the chords on that. And I don't know. I guess I really grew accustomed to the size of it, and I played obviously a full size guitar for a while, and then for whatever reason, have just kind of decided to stick mostly with mandolin. I don't know what it is. Perhaps something about the soul of the instrument.
Do you remember the first time you connected with the mandolin? Like hearing it or?
I grew up around bluegrass music like you, and so it was kind of always around me. This
Figure it out.
particular sound, and my dad had sort of like a pickup bluegrass band in the Denver area back in the day called High Street.
Nice.
They actually took second place to the Dixie Chicks in the band contest at Telluride one year.
Oh,
Believe it or not, that's kind of their claim to fame
I dig it.
back
That's
in
good.
the early '90s. But anyway, there's a great musician by the name of Patrick Heister in that band, and he always just had such a soulful approach on the mandolin and to music in general. And so I think growing up around Patrick and Gus Cook was the guitar player in the band, and my dad growing up with around those guys just kind of gave me a really good fundamental appreciation for the function of music in everyday life. So I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah, just being a part of like, normal life, music, and being around it, jam sessions. And one of my favorite places to be any time of year is the Leslie Camp at Rocky Glass. And y'all have been holding that down for what, 20 years or something like that? Longer?
Yeah, it's been, according to our calculations, somewhere 21, 22 years. And we had never missed one since we started going until obviously last summer. So that was a sad thing, I know, for all of us to not have that in our lives. Because I know somebody, you all probably have your own equivalent to like something like what we're speaking of, this camp at Rocky Grass. So
Oh,
But we'll be back to it, one of these days, one of these years,
a
whenever it
bit.
may
I mean,
be.
like honestly, I don't think there's anything quite like that like that vibe out there. It's super special. I've never come across that really, just like that
Huh.
anywhere else. So when you first started playing, how did you get going? Did you learn like, G, C, and D like two finger chords?
Yeah, so I guess back to my like early experiences actually playing the mandolin, because just a little backstory, I started on the uke, and as soon as I was basically big enough to hold a full size guitar, I played one of those, and then I think I was about 11 years old when my dad actually got a mandolin for Christmas one year, because he's a banjo player mostly, been playing guitar since his high school days, but he wanted to branch out a little bit, and he was trying to play some fiddle and struggling, with the bowing and intonation. So he said,
Right.
maybe I'll get a mandolin and that'll help out my fiddle playing a little bit. And
Okay.
he learned a few tunes on it, but didn't really take to it much. But I ended up just playing on it all the time, because also at that time I was taking Suzuki violin lessons,
Okay, cool.
and I was always so bad with the standard notation. It was probably more just the lack of discipline there to really learn how to do
Mhm.
it. But I was
That's
growing up at these bluegrass festivals, and everywhere I went, it's these musicians who they weren't looking at a page, and so
a
that's
paper.
kind of what I wanted to do. But I am thankful also for that foundation from Suzuki. But anyways, I was kind of learning about where the notes were for the left hand in those studies, and then I kind of had the flat picking or the right hand technique down to some degree from playing guitar. And so my dad got that Mando for Christmas. It was a Kentucky actually,
That's a good one.
and then the rest is history.
Now, when you just first started playing, were you running scales and that kind of stuff, or did you go straight to tunes?
I think in those days it was mostly tunes that I was playing and transferring from the fiddle and guitar.
Do you remember the first couple
Uh,
you learned?
Man, good question. I was obsessed with wheelhouse actually, way back in the day. Actually, that would predate my mandolin days. Actually, it was actually on the uke. I
Wow,
had this obsession with wheelhouse, and I didn't I
precocious.
didn't know how to play the actual melody.
Uh-huh.
So what I did instead was I just played G G F G G F
I'll
G
get it.
G F D D G.
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
That's kind of the structure of it, at least for a 7-year old that could kind of get it done. And also I could play that at a pretty rapid tempo, obviously, because I wasn't playing all the 16th notes, which is really required of the song. And so uh, I would actually sometimes cry if my dad's band didn't play it fast enough. And so I feel bad, looking back, because that's like, that's kind of stressful for those dudes to really like rip wheelhouse at a
Right?
fast tempo, or at least the tempo that I could play the half notes,
Uh-huh.
or the quarter notes of da 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 da
Uh-huh.
da.
And so
Um,
that's a pretty
yeah,
that's a pretty creative move for a 7-year-old to do. And so no one was like, "Here's how you can do it." You just figured it out.
I guess so. My dad probably had a hand in it. He was my main teacher in those days, and taught me all the chords. And he was really on me from an early age, especially on guitar, to focus on the rhythm playing.
Hmm.
And I'm super grateful for that, because back in those days, I wanted to just cut to the chase and start ripping, and I didn't really understand the fundamentals of what makes a bluegrass groove and all that stuff. And so he was always making me practice like the bass runs in like bluegrass guitar rhythm. And
Hmm.
also, I
On the
still
mandolin.
remember him making me play a G scale. It was either before I could have dessert or before we had a jam, or worked on something else. But it was like,
That's funny.
until you play this G scale all the way up and down, no mistakes. We're not gonna. I can't remember. It was so long ago. It was,
That is a good motivational reward
and
system.
thinking back on it, I guess it must
Very
have
good.
happened more than once. Uh,
That is so funny. Do you remember when like you first wrote your first tune when you started writing tunes?
yeah, let's see. Well, back in those very early days, I wrote my one and only song that I've ever written. It's called Little Beach.
Wow.
And
You
it
play a
was
little,
about
play a
a
little,
place.
you
What's
play a
that?
little, would you play a little verse and a chorus for us just so we can hear it?
Sure, it's just real simple. It's like little beach, lot of water, little beach, getting hotter.
Nice.
Hear the train coming down the track. I don't know when, but I'll be coming back to Little Beach. And then the second verse actually references my dad's bluegrass band that I was
How's
mentioning.
that go?
Uh, let's see. Ice cream cones out in the sun.
Aftermath.
Holly and Jerry are having fun. Uh, let's see. Oh, yeah. Patrick plays the mandolin, and Gus is there backing him at Little Beach. And
That's
so, I was only like 7 or so.
that's
And so I think my
amazing.
dad was probably feeding me ideas,
Okay, sure.
feeding me lines. So it's definitely a co write. I can't take all the credit
I love
uh,
that's
on that
amazing.
one.
So early on,
Um,
you were empowered as a creative spirit with the music.
yeah, I guess you could say that. Absolutely. I had a lot of support.
That's powerful. And then who were some of the first mandolin player like mandolin heroes that really stoked you up and lit your fire to to study?
Well, man, I always remember having a connection with Sam Bush, obviously growing up at Telluride. He's the king of Telluride, and just that chop. I I remember that, going back as far as I have memories, probably just the feeling and the tone of that chop. And strength in numbers has always been a huge one for me. I always heard that one growing up around the house. And his playing on the Bela albums too, obviously Drive. And so that stuff has always been huge. And then Dog obviously has been a huge one for me too. I still remember the first time that I heard that first quintet record. uh, David Grisman Quintet with EMD as the first track. And I believe it was on tape, actually. And we threw it on, and there was just an excitement and a fire in that music that it hit me. And I remember it vividly to this day, just like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, that's what I want to do. And I think that was still at the point where I kind of dabbled equally in fiddle, mandolin, and guitar. But to be honest, who really did it for me was that old Chris Thile.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him live and in the flesh that same year that my dad got the mandolin for Christmas. And
Wow.
I believe it was at the Aspen Jazz Festival. He was there playing with Nickel Creek, and I got to see him do his thing in person. And like, there was just nobody else who sounded like that ever.
Hmm.
And so just the phenomenon really hit me. And it was also that same year, I believe, or maybe the next year, where him and Nickel Creek came and taught at the Rocky Grass Academy
Oh, nice. Yeah.
too. And I think, it was that same year because I was in the Guitar Academy. But truth be told, I really just wanted to be hanging out with Chris.
Yeah.
But I was kind of following him around all week. And so that's inspiration for life. And then not long after that, the Not Who Wander or Lost album came out. And it was just this like really vibrant, futuristic sounding picking that had soul to it and just so much originality. But then it had all the guys playing on there, Stuart and Bela and Jerry and Edgar. And so that was a really exciting one for me in
Full,
particular.
full cast of heroes. Yeah, this is a different situation than like, oh, I love Jimi Hendrix. I can't go to like just hang out with Jimi Hendrix, like like, or the opportunities with bluegrass music, folk music, acoustic music are just so different in terms of community. So right there, you got Sam Bush, you got Grisman, and you got Thiele, who are all like super energetic players. How might you go about describing kind of some of the nuances of each, and kind of like their different specialties as it relates to how you kind of incorporated them into your own style, into your inspiration?
Yeah, so I remember hearing Feely actually say a long time ago that what you got to do is listen to who your heroes listened to, uh, which was kind of like maybe a subtle nudge of like, hey, man, you're never going to pick it like me, which is true. And that's a very liberating
Good.
realization.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Liberating. Nice one.
yeah. And I also remember just being around Dog and Sam Bush and other heroes of mine, Ronnie, Compton, Statman. There's so many. I don't want to leave anybody out, but you know the list. Uh, but I I recall hearing almost all those guys talk about their obsession with Monroe.
Hmm.
And so, after I had kind of gone down this Feely path and kind of had gotten maybe a little frustrated with that for many reasons, probably, that's kind of what saved me a little bit and got me back to the fundamentals of what the mandolin really does in a bluegrass band and that sort of tradition, and the importance of
No
paying
problem.
homage to the tradition and just respecting that, and that in doing so it'll really give back to you
Oh yeah,
uh, in a way.
yeah.
So super thankful for that. And, since then I've kind of gone back in time and just tried to dig up all those old roots with Monroe and even the pre-Monroe stuff, like how did this guy come to be? What was
Exactly.
he
For his hero.
checking out? So
Totally. And
yes. Oh
you've connected a lot with Hartford's music over the years too, right?
yeah, man, he's been a big one for me. Just I think at the end of the day, really, because he's one of those guys who, like I'm saying, has this deep reverence for the tradition, was just so tight with Monroe and so into all that stuff, Earl and, uh, Benny Martin and all that. He was almost like obsessed with this. And same with the old time fiddling. But then here's this guy who has that in one hand, but then on the other hand, it's like this ultimate sort of groundbreaking creativity and just like he was so set to kind of do something new with his music at the same time. And so I think my favorite musicians are the people like that who kind of have it all kind of balled up in one package, because I think you can't really have this groundbreaking creativity unless you're putting stuff into the fire, into the blender,
Nice.
the inspiration, which I think is all that other stuff that came before.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. Kind of doing your homework and knowing the rules, so you know how to break them with style.
That's right. Yeah. Because
Gee,
you're not going to be those other guys no matter how much you love them. And they wouldn't be those guys if they didn't, uh, do something different from what they were hearing. So,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. If you want to play guitar like Jerry Garcia, you got to study a little Earl Scruggs. You gotta have these pieces that they were putting in place. So let's talk about a little bit about your early ensemble playing. What was the first band you were in?
well, I had a little family band growing up, of course, with Sister Gina on fiddle, Papa Owen on guitar, and Beth Cook, our dear friend from Boulder, was playing bass. We were called 60 miles per hour, and then I reached a certain age where 60 didn't feel fast enough anymore, and so we became 75
That's so
mph for a few gigs. I don't know. I had this obsession with fast
oh
back
yeah,
in the day. Maybe we all, and now I'm just trying to play slow,
right, right.
learn
Good
how to
up
play
there.
slow.
That's
Uh, and then you realize they're really the same thing.
right.
Playing fast is just like playing slow, just faster.
That's right. That's right.
Which
How
is a John McGann quote, actually.
yeah.
Dear old John McGann. Did you ever meet John?
I did not, but I've heard so much reverence for him.
Yeah, he was a really great player and teacher and guy to be around in those early Boston days.
Yeah, was
But
a teacher at Berkeley?
he was, yeah, for a long time actually, and really kind of opened up my ears to a lot of new concepts, and had a great way of introducing a bluegrass musician to a lot of these ideas. Like diminished chord, that sounds scary, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It sounds scary, and it literally sounds scary
Yeah.
too. The actual chord and scale. But then he was like, okay, let's pick this thing apart. If you flatten each one of these notes, they offer a different dominant seventh chord. And so he's like, now you can approach this diminished chord as any one of these four dominant seventh chords.
That's
So
already getting over my head. Do you have your mandolin handy? Is there?
yeah, man, I should have came more prepared. I'm probably horrifically out of tune.
I'll do.
I have one sitting here, but
I'll do a little commercial while you're rousting
well,
there. If you
it's
want.
just
Oh, there
I've
you go.
got it right here. It was handily hanging on the wall.
Nice.
Um,
Oh,
so
beautiful.
yeah, thank you, man. I just got this last
Hey,
fall.
now.
It was kind of an impulse buy. I was over at Groon, and
Wow.
I actually remembered it from a previous time I had been there, and I was like, "Wow, this thing is still here. It sounds so great."
Wow.
Um,
20s?
woo! So it's a real sweetie. Excuse the tuning, but for the sake of the exercise, I think I can demonstrate.
Oh,
So G diminished. This is all thanks to John McGann,
nice.
my
Oh,
college teacher. Rest in peace. So if we take this G diminished here, we could also refer to that as any one of these notes diminished. So it could be B flat diminished, E diminished, C sharp diminished, or G diminished. You could call it any one of those things. Typically, they would refer to it as whatever's in the bass. You
okay.
know, like if there's a bass note happening, that's gonna like probably determine, unless it's a slash chord where they're putting something else down there. So anyways, if you look at this chord and we flatten one note at a time, so we'll start in the treble and flatten this top note. It's
Nice.
pretty horrible with the tuning, but that gives us F sharp 7, right?
Yeah.
And so now you know, okay, I can play F sharp 7 over this, and it's going to offer me a particular sound. Same with all these other notes if we flatten them one at a time. So the next one, what does that leave us with? C7, right?
Oh, yeah.
So now we've got F sharp 7 and C7 in the bag, two slightly different sounds over the same chord. And now another one from this to this, E flat 7, right?
Yeah.
So now we got F sharp, C, and E flat 7. There's one more in there. A7, right? So now you know that you can play any of these four sounds over this diminished chord. And so it's a lot easier to approach it when you're narrowing the scope rather than this big like ocean of diminished, which,
Interesting.
you know, because diminished can be so many different things. And as a folk musician, sort of bluegrass player, it's a lot easier for most of us to think of A7 or C7, even E flat 7, than, you know, E diminished or C sharp diminished or whatever. So
Yeah.
uh, that was a big one for me, and he had all sorts of cool little concepts like that.
Is there a kind of a practical, maybe intermediate level way to kind of demonstrate that over some bluegrass, something?
Yes, funny you should ask. So if we were taking Deep River Blues, I always use that. That's kind of like the one diminished chord that I know of that actually is like actually in the song. You know what I mean? Like you can always throw a quick sharp 4 diminished from 4 back to 1, but this one's like definitely in the song. You know what I mean? So let it rain, let it pour. There's that same chord that I was just using. So this is perfect example. Let it rain, let it pour, let it rain, pour a lot more. So you could go. So that was the first one, the F sharp, right?
Okay, yeah.
So then the second one is easy because that's C7, which is the 4. And so that might not be your best choice for this because it could sound confusing, like you're just playing the 4, but it works if you really zone into the sound. It's just that one note away. So, and typically it's better to actually just stick with the pure arpeggio of 1, 3, 5, 7. I was throwing like the 4th in there, but if you just use the arpeggio, it'll really define that sound that I'm talking about. And that it does sound kind of funny because then you go to the 4 right after in the song.
Right.
Let it rain, let it pour, let it rain, a whole lot more. But just to explain the concept, you get it. And then so next one would be E flat 7, right?
Nice.
That wasn't the best way to voice lead it.
Very cool. Now, how did you make that decision? Why did you decide that you didn't like the way it was led? And then how did you get to the better one?
So I guess it goes back to just like the fundamental concept of voice leading, which is that if you make like the smaller move from one chord to the next, the smaller the move is, the better or more intuitive the sound.
So you were just like maybe one fret away from what you liked better, or something.
That's right. So that's nice because
like
it's
that
little chromatic down to the E flat. And that's also nice because that is going from the flat 7 of the E flat up to the 5th of the G back to our 1 chord, right? So if you can either stay on the same note or go a half step or a whole step, you're doing pretty good for the voice leading thing. Because it is what it sounds like, voice leading. It's easy to sing. It's melodic and intuitive, And so the great piano players in jazz or guitar player, I mean, it happens in classical music too. It's not a genre specific thing, but that's like why it sounds nice, is because you've got these little minuscule movements happening from one chord to the next. Like if you're going around the circle of fifths, like from B7 to E7 to A7 to D7 to G7 to C7. That's a nice way to voice lead it because you're moving all the steps are so small in between each chord. So here you have the tritone and the bass that's just moving down a half step, each one of them. So from B7 to E7, you've gone down a fourth in the chord from B to E, but it's just a small little half step motion in the two bottom notes. The top note, you're moving a whole step, so that's pretty good,
Yeah.
Like Swing on a Star.
That's right. Swing. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that one actually, but
You know that old song, that old jazz standard, would you like to swing on a star, carry moonbeams home in a jar? It's the very same movie you were just making.
okay, cool. Does it maybe hop up there for the bridge or something?
No, then it moves really kind of strange from that point on, but it just
Okay,
moves back into a straight up C to F kind of move.
nice.
That's a beautiful voicing. And Dominic, you're just
Absolutely.
such a great teacher. I want to put in the chat your email. Is it DominickLeslie at gmail.com?
That's correct.
DominickLeslie at gmail.com. And you teach through Skype and Zoom? Or
Yes, sir.
cool.
Yeah,
Let's see, DominickLie
you got it.
at gmail.com. So yeah,
Yes, sir.
y'all hit Dominic up for some lessons, because he can really, he's. Did you get your degree? Did you get a degree?
I didn't. I went to Berkeley for 2 years, and
Sounds
then I
like it.
kind of hit the road and didn't look back. My brother just graduated though, so I'm proud of him for
Yeah,
taking home the trophy, so to speak,
and
having something to show for it.
you kind of took the trophy in a different way. So
Yeah.
you found an ensemble to go out on the road with. Is that right?
Yeah, so I guess my first real like road gig, you could say, happened that first year after I was at Berkeley, and it was with Missy Raines and the New Hip, actually.
Oh,
And
nice. She's
so
so great.
she is so great, great, amazing bass player with just such amazing time and such a cozy feel. It's so good to play with, and one of the sweetest people too. I just love Missy and Ben. But yeah, it was kind of crazy there for a while because I was doing school up in Boston and then flying out almost every weekend to play with those guys. And not long after that, I joined up with the Deadly Gentlemen with Greg List, Sam Grissman, Stash, and Mike Barnett and those guys. And so this was just something had to give at that point. And so that's when I parted ways playing with Missy and was just focusing on the gents. And then we became so busy eventually that I kind of had to give up on the school thing, or at least that seemed like the move at the time.
So you got your formative training with the family band, and then if you kind of had to, put into like a little nutshell, what was maybe the main thing, if you could distill it down to a main thing, the main thing you learned from the experience with Missy, kind of musically, or about ensemble playing, or just something that kind of stuck with you about that experience.
Yeah, there's a lot of them that come to mind.
It doesn't have to be one.
Something that comes to mind is playing with Gene LeBay actually in my Colorado days before I moved out to Boston
Mhm.
and started all that. I was lucky to kind of have a tutelage under Gene LeBay when he was still living out there. He's so great, and he's actually now back in Colorado. We had a little Zoom catch up the other day, which was real fun. But he produced my first and only album, Signs of Courage, which I did when I was 15, going on 16.
I was so impressed that you put ducks on a mill pond on there. Right.
Oh, cool.
That's so great.
That's right.
Stuart, yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun tune, man. And I put Ebenezer Scrooge on there. I only have this in my mind because I Dropboxed it to somebody who was curious the other day, but I played the Greer version of Ebenezer Scrooge, and I don't have really any idea what the Monroe version sounds like. So guilty as charged, but I'm sure it's completely different.
It'll be there for you if you ever,
Yeah, that's right.
chiseled in stone, as it were.
Yeah, but anyway, this goes back to playing with Gene, and we were in a band together also at the time called Long Road Home with Justin Hoffenberg, Martin Gilmore, a couple Colorado guys, Pete Wernick, you might have heard of him.
Heard of him? Yeah.
But that was a
Wow.
real fun training for me as a youngster. As soon as I got my driver's license, I was driving down to Fort Collins and Boulder to hang with Gene and rehearse with those guys. And I remember Gene was just always on me about the chop, like, no, like louder, like, and that's where it goes. And he explained to me that he needs it as a bass player and that we're a team. It's not just like every guy's doing their thing and like he's a great bass player on his own. It's like the importance of like really linking up as a rhythm section. And I remember Gene always kind of being on me about that, and which I'm super thankful for, because it
Yeah.
is super important.
Totally symbiotic. When he said that, so like, how did that change the way you thought about or what you were doing? Just like giving it a little more goose, just like leaning into it a little bit more. Or?
Yeah, just trying to kind of pull the sound, and then also realizing that, like, whoa, there's these sort of bigger musical things happening, and that are way more important than just playing a hot solo or something,
Hmm.
or sounding clean, or
Yeah,
these things that I was probably more caught up with as a youngster, like
making
a
it all
lot of
about
us tend
you.
to be.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, right. Yeah, kind of bringing everybody along with you and working as a team and all those ideas.
Yeah. So, what did you learn from Missy in that experience?
Well, man, that was huge, because I mean, there was a lot of musical stuff that I learned, obviously, but then also uh, just kind of how to be on the road too,
That,
because that was my first experience really doing that, and that's like, I kind of realized that that's almost half of the game. I mean, the
totally.
music is should always take the first importance, but then you're only on stage for an hour or two every night, and so the rest of it is just this life out on the road, and so, as you're like a big family out there, and so just kind of learning how to do your thing, and be comfortable and get along with others, and all that kind of it's almost like a spiritual training in a way, or something,
Absolutely, and I think that you've always, come across to me as someone who has a lot of social intelligence. But where did you feel like your growth edges and the challenge was in that department?
Oh man, good question. There's certainly a lot of them, uh, but I think just having to be on a schedule
Hmm.
like that, and just realizing, like, okay, this is my job and I can't mess it up, and like,
Time management.
especially with the van call thing, like, you don't want to be the last guy to the van, or
Right,
like there's going to be some vibes, and I was a youngster
right,
too, so there's already kind of that dynamic of, like, the freshman on campus or whatever happening, and
right,
so
right.
I was extra careful about the timing one, and that's good training for just life in general, right there.
That was me in a nutshell. I remember my first gig in Nashville. Always late, always just like, where is he? Oh, your clothes aren't pressed. Your blah, blah blah all this kind of stuff. And then when I was leading my band for the first time, it was like, okay, here are all these guys, learning this lesson. Here's your karma. This is what it's like. Oh, so how do you like it now?
Oh, that is so funny. Yeah.
Learning all the time. And then so you went from the Missy Rains and the New Hip to the Deadly Gentleman, which is a really super progressive band, very groundbreaking band.
Yeah, and I would consider Missy's band pretty progressive too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it was, just thinking more back to the Missy days. I remember so vividly this one night, might have been in Cincinnati or something, but Ethan Ballinger, the guitar player, sent a new
Brilliant.
tune out for the tour, and I think that was our first gig of the tour, and it's like, hey, everybody, I'd like to do this, and Missy knows it, and have it ready for the first gig. And I learned it once, like, kind of brushed up
Great.
on it, but
Uh-huh.
I didn't like go back and learn it again and like make sure I had it for the
Right.
gig. And it was this really weird, like, I think it was called like R2D2 or something, or maybe that's what I called it in my head. But it was just really strange, like different keys going on, and I just totally biffed it, like, and it was a mandolin feature. I was playing the melody, and I just crashed and burned, and it was like, okay, let me start that again. Sorry, guys. And then it like happened again,
Oh,
and
ouch.
then we just
Oh,
had to like soldier through somehow. It must have sounded awful, but I
oh,
really learned my lesson that
that'll
night of
stick
like,
with you. Yeah.
man, you got to do your homework and like know it, and be confident that you know it when you go up there, and you can't just hope that you can pull it out of the recesses of your, or the depths of your back burner, because it ain't going to happen with something like that. And
Yeah.
they'll stick with you, those experiences.
Yeah, I was just thinking, at the beginning of the session here, I was playing a little of the Hawktail live performance. Can't remember where it was, but some really super complex arrangements in that band. Of course, I'm just guessing that y'all are all kind of coming up with them together, or do you all bring different components together and just kind of work on it as a team?
Yeah, for the that round of material or that batch, we were all there for pretty much all the hours in the room working everything up. And some of us are obviously more heavy lifters than others in the band. I won't name names. You can probably guess. But it was super cool to just be there for the whole process this time around and get to kind of learn how those guys approach it and see what that's like. Because the first album we made, I kind of just showed up and all the music was like, here you go. It was just kind of figured out. Um, which, that was sweet too. I think both of them kind of have their advantages,
Yeah.
uh, because I felt like, whoa, like, I hope I'm getting this right kind of the first time around. But now, since I was there from the ground up, I kind of, I saw the music sort of being born, which makes you have more of a connection to it, obviously.
I think that what y'all are putting together, of course, it's not always evolving, but it's just such a nice balance of different influences, from the old time to the kind of Celtic kind of stuff. It just all flows, great arrangements. It all seems really really earthy, and of course I'm a huge fan of all the folks in the band, especially Brittany. She's just absolutely one of my favorite fiddlers, and just intensely intuitive and quick on the draw. What's it like to be working with her? Because she is just so quick.
Yeah, it's super inspiring slash intimidating at times
Yeah,
to
yeah.
try to meet her on that level, that dynamic and that intensity that she brings. It can be done with a mandolin, but I'm telling you, it's tough. It's a great challenge because there's a lot of stuff that we do together, either in unison or in harmony, and so that's kind of I'm trying to step into those shoes a little bit just sonically, which is a great challenge.
Well, you make it look easy, and your mandolin is just. Do you have a name for your mandolin?
I've sort of jokingly called it Vince Gilchrist
That's a good one.
for a long time, so yeah, I'll go with that.
It is absolutely one of the best mandolins on the planet, and I'm sure it's grown with you, and it has such a beautiful sound. Has do you feel like the sound of the mandolin has changed a lot over the time? How long have you had it?
Man, I've had it for quite a while now. I got it in 2007, actually, from the dog, and it's been my main axe ever since. And seeing a lot of wear and tear, and absolutely, it's grown with me, and we've kind of grown together in a cool way. And
It's
it
huge.
is in it. Yeah, it's even in the wintertime where it gets real cold and dry out, it still manages to sound pretty dang good, even when the action sinks way down. And right now, it is in pretty bad need of a setup. The bridge top is cracked. It had a crack on it maybe a year ago. I got it fixed, and now, of course, in the dryness, the crack is reopened,
Mm,
and gotten even a little bigger. So it's like one side is actually sinking all the way down to where it's like almost touching the bottom
oh,
part of the bridge, and
yeah.
it still sounds freaking great when I'm playing it. The E string gets splatty
Uh-huh.
a lot. And so I think that's probably a factor, as well as the action and the dryness, because it's like I'll bring it down to New Orleans or something, and then it just sounds
So
fat and great, and that goes away. And so, yeah, I'll have to get that bridge top replaced. But other than that, it's just a pretty special one. I'm lucky to have it.
Vince Gilchrist, epic. Um, I'm curious, and I'm sure a lot of folks here and listening later would be interested to hear just a little bit about your practice routine.
Yeah, so it's been pretty scattered these days, if I'm going to be honest.
Mhm.
It's almost bizarre to have all the time, and I've never been a super regimented practicer where I do like a little bit of this, 10 minutes of this and this every day. I know that's probably a great thing to do and works for a lot of people, but
Never done that.
for
I'll
whatever reason, I just
recommend
can't.
it.
And I find that every day is different. And so to me, the important thing is that I'm always involving myself with music in one form or another every day. And honestly, these days it's mostly been listening. I consider that to be practice too.
What are you listening to?
Um, Man, a lot of stuff. Alex Hargrave's a great fiddler
Sure.
from New York. Turned me on to a cool podcast from this guy named Pablo Held, who lives in New York,
Is that
and
HELD?
that's right.
Mhm.
And he has been doing these jazz interviews with heroes of his throughout like the entire pandemic.
Dig it.
And the one that I recently saw that is really cool, it's like 4 hours long, is with this great bass player named Ben Street.
Hmm.
And Ben is just a super inspiring guy. He plays with like all the greats in New York, and so has cool stories about that, but then also just really cool musical recommendations that I've kind of been going through.
Nice.
That's been my current listening project, and I'll just uh, rattle them off for you guys if you're curious.
Yeah.
Um, so many good ones. He mentions this record by Paul Bley called "Open to Love."
Mm-hmm.
Paul Bley, and it's beautiful. It almost sounds like early, like he sort of invented Brad Meldau or something in a
Oh
way.
wow. Okay.
I wasn't familiar with him, but just so gorgeous, that style of solo piano.
Dig it.
Another one is called "Free Spirits" by the pianist Mary Lou Williams.
Hmm.
And it's just such a beautiful record. It's trio, bass, piano, and drums. And the bass player on there is Buster Williams, who was a big hero for this guy, Ben Street. And he was mostly referring to the bass playing on this album, but the whole thing is just really brilliant. Just the way the trio plays together is a really good time. He studied with the great bassist Miroslav Vitus,
Hmm.
who is somewhat famous for his time playing with Chick Corea, as well as probably many other things. But he mentions a favorite record of his called "First Meeting," which is really a cool one. And then one of my favorites is a Jakob Bro album. I think I'm saying that right, but probably not. It's Jakob Bro, Bro, called Balladeering, with a lot of greats who you may have heard of on there. Paul Motian on drums, Bill Frisell guitar, Lee Konitz, who passed away earlier in COVID, and this guy Ben Street playing bass. Super great and really cool, interesting concept. There's not a whole lot of music out there, I think, that sounds like this.
Dig.
Another one is a Bill Evans album that's actually duo with Toots Thielmans, the great harmonica player. And they're playing with a band on there. It's really cool. I love Bill. They go on about Bill for a long time in that thing. And then he also mentions this album by Arturo Benedetti Michelangeli, who is a pianist. And apparently, this album from it looks like the Warsaw, or I guess there's two concerts, one in Warsaw, one in London. Arturo Benedetti Michelangeli playing Beethoven, Ravel, Rachmaninoff, and Debussy. And he mentions this not only because it's great, but apparently the Kind of Blue band, the Miles Quintet, the first Miles Quintet, was listening to this before and as they were recording Kind of Blue. So that was an influence on those guys as they were making one of the heaviest albums of all time, in my mind. He also mentions a Bach version of the Well-Tempered Clavier. I don't know, however you want to say that, but it's by the pianist Edwin Fischer. And he said that this was just blowing his mind. Well-Tempered Clavier by Bach, played by Edwin Fischer. And he offers that it's just a really unique version, and different from a lot of the more well-known ones. And then the last one he mentions is this Paul Desmond album. And I'm forgetting now the name of the bass player that is on there, but that was sort of what he was referencing, is this is one of his favorite examples of like jazz bass, is on this Paul Desmond album, Pure Desmond. And you might know Paul Desmond because he's on the that sort of well-known album with Take Five and Blue Rondo a la Turk with I'm spacing on his name now. You know the one. You all know it.
No worries.
With pianist I'm spacing. But anyways,
Blue Rondo a la Turk, Dave Brubeck.
Yes, Brubeck. Thank you, Adam, my man.
Nice one.
Good to see you. But anyway, that's Paul Desmond playing on there. And I was like, I got to write that one down. It sounds cool because of the bass playing. And then also because I remember Daryl Anger talking about Paul Desmond at the Shasta camp years ago and saying that was sort of a big influence on him in terms of sort of this melodic style of improvising. So
nice. We all those recommendations. That's
yeah, man. Sorry to just kind of heap them on you there, but that's what's been getting me excited these days.
Nice. Appreciate you sharing that. Clifton had a couple questions. You want to go ahead and ask those, Clifton? You put them in the chat, but you might, if you would like to go ahead and just ask.
Sure.
Them.
I was wondering if you had a favorite go-to mode that you'd like to like jump to, maybe when things were starting to sound monotonous in like an improvisation. Do you like to go to a particular exotic mode or anything like that?
You know, I wouldn't say I have a particular go-to for any situation. And honestly, I'm not really like a huge mode guy. Like if you talk to Jake Jolliffe, he could tell you what everyone is called and how to use it and all that stuff. And that's on my practice list. You know, I'm a big fan, obviously, of the mixed Lydian sound, the flat 7.
Right.
For example, that's all mixed Lydian mode right there.
Right.
And you know that's going to be great in the blues, any sort of fiddle tune like that. But then I also like Lydian. The Lydian sharp 4 sound.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Do you ever do Lydian Dominant? Do you ever play the dominant, add the dominant note into the Lydian? Yeah, because like that's like where, you know, that jingle for The Simpsons comes from, Lydian Dominant.
That's right. Totally.
Hey, by the way, also, when you improvise, do you have like certain hooks that you're gonna like you're familiar with? Say we just did, you know, Wheelhouse. You're already familiar with it. Are there certain hooks that you're gonna be like improvising to get your way to with like a preconceived notion, or are you just flying seat of the pants the whole way?
You know, after playing tunes like that so many times, I find that you sort of develop certain go-tos, certain patterns or habits that you like to hit over certain parts of the tune because they sound good, they might be satisfying. And I find for me, the ones that are in that category are usually the licks or the lines that are somewhat related to the original melodic material of the tune, but it's sort of like your own. It's like you're just playing around with this initial DNA of the tune and sort of rearranging it. So that's what I like to do. And it's sort of like a controlled improvisation. So if you heard two bars of this solo, you would know what tune it is, but you're not just playing like, the defined note for note melody.
Yeah. Which like Feely, he can do that at times, he can take off in directions and it's like, what is, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh God, that worked. What the heck was that? I don't even know that,
Absolutely. Yeah. I have so much respect for that too. That style of just complete improv where you have no preconceived notions and, maybe someday I'll get there. And I think
I don't think you're that far from what I've heard. And I love your stuff with Hawkwind, man. That's great. Or Hawktail, I'm sorry. That's just great stuff. Thank you so much for answering my question.
Hey, absolutely. Good questions. Anybody else?
Yeah, we had one more question in the chat. How do you think about accompanying guitar in a duet format?
Man, great question. I had sort of a pipe dream for a while of doing a duets with guitar players album, because it's something I enjoy doing so much. And I have a lot of really wonderful guitar playing friends. But that's a great question, because as soon as you're in the duo format, the sort of tried and true bluegrass formula is not completely out of the picture, but it's not there for you in the same way that it normally would be, i.e. like the subdivision of the banjo and the bass telling you where to chop and all this. So you really got to free it up and be more creative
just
with
like Monroe
your rhythm playing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Monroe is the perfect example of someone who is so free with his rhythm playing. If you listen, he wasn't always chopping, only when he felt like it was needed, and I love what the energy that causes in the band when he's chopping. But he would do strummy stuff, he would play the melody sometimes, all these different textures that are available to you. There's a great duo album of Mike Compton and David Greer. That would be a good thing to listen to if it's something you're thinking about. But it's like at that point the straight chop isn't gonna work anymore, or it's not gonna sound right, I don't think, because you don't have that teammate with the bass. And so it's going to be up to you, I think, to play a little more like a guitar would play as a rhythm player. So adding more subdivisions, and also think about changing up the voicings in the left hand of playing more open and ringy, sort of strummy stuff, sort of like what Tim O'Brien is so good at doing.
Is that what you sent me?
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we had someone join and I forgot to mute.
Oh, all good. But anyway, yeah, just thinking about these different textures aside from the chop. Like, how can you fill in more subdivision without losing the groove? And, obviously you're focused on the guitar player and just listening to them and try to lift them up, trying to make them sound good. So that's the name of the game at the end of the day.
Really good question. Yeah. So, if there are any more questions, feel free to, Josh, go ahead, buddy.
Hey, Dom, how are you? Thanks for coming and chatting. I had to sneak off and get on a work call, so you might have already talked about this, and if so, I apologize. But I was kind of, I've been working with Chris and David and doing a bunch of Monroe stuff, and for me, Monroe, like, when I started playing mandolin, people were like, well, if you want to play bluegrass mandolin, you have to listen to Monroe. And it was like I had to get used to it. It was like beer, at first.
Totally. Yeah.
I came through like the jam band, Garcia Grisman, and then I was like, oh, like bluegrass album band, Tony Rice, that hits. But it took me a while before I was like, on the Monroe train. When did Monroe come into view for you as like did you have a moment when you like went deep on Monroe, or did you kind of go around the side?
I think at first I kind of went around the side. We had a couple records laying around, and I remember I got to actually see him at Rocky Grass one year. And I remember that dude, Patrick Heister, who's always at the campsite, the mandolin player in my dad's band. I remember I was probably 8 years old or something at the time. He tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "Hey, Dom, you know who that is? That's Bill Mambo." He's a real jokester too. But I still remember him saying that and just knowing that it was like super important at the time. And so after that, just like hearing all the guys talk about him, it felt more like something that I should check out, but I didn't get it back in those days because I was just all about the red hot picking, feely, all that stuff. And I think what really made me go down the rabbit hole and change it from something that I felt like I should check out to something that I had to check out. Like I knew like I wanted to, eat this all up was when Andy Statman came to Berkeley in maybe my first or second year. And he was given this workshop. And at the time I was like, oh man, this is the cat. He's like the most psychedelic, progressive, spiritual mandolin player there is, which is true pretty much. But he was talking about Bill Monroe the whole time and said even that he had transcribed every Bill Monroe solo and Jesse McReynolds solo ever recorded.
Wow.
And then, hey, thanks, Zach. And also, so this was during his bluegrass phase. And then he sold his mandolin, got rid of all his bluegrass records, bought a saxophone, and then started studying free jazz. So to me, that's just like, what? Like, who are you? But anyway, I remember at the time he gave us an example of Monroe, and he said, Bill Monroe is the most avant-garde mandolin player. And at the time, I'm like, what are you talking about, man? He's just like the forefather with all those guys saying you got to play it like him. And like, what? Like Andy Statman says he's the most avant-garde. And so he told us to listen to Bill's solo on the Prisoners song.
Nice.
And you probably know the one, Chris, but there's 2 recordings of it. And the one I'm referring to is, you'll know it right away because there's drums and piano and electric guitar on the track. So like, who knows what was going on behind the scenes at this session. But Bill plays the most crazy futuristic solo you've ever heard. It's just like soundscapes over this tune. It's so unbelievable. And that really just kind of blew my head off hearing that. Just like, okay, this is like what planet is this even from kind of thing. He's right. And then I remember some stuff also on that Bill Monroe, Doc Watson live album, a few solos sort of in like a similar vein where it's just like what? It's like, where is he coming from kind of thing. And so I love it. And it sort of like saved me in a way because
I love that.
I just thought that it was so cool. Like after kind of drifting too far from the shore,
just
so to
when
speak,
you thought you were out, they pulled you back.
Yeah,
right?
well, and then I realized like, man, like this guy was doing it all on the mandolin. He was the band leader, the composer. He was like this American music icon, and he had the rhythm, the fiddle tunes, the improvisation, and most importantly, the soul and the psychedelia all going on. And so he was a total forward thinker and genre bender, which is also just incredibly cool in the creative category.
Totally. Well said. One of my favorite stories about, Bill and Dog and Andy Statman was I guess maybe Andy was taking lessons from Dog in New York, and Grisman gives him a stack of Monroe records. He says, take these and, go listen to them. And so the next week, Andy comes back for his lesson or whatever, and he hands Grisman back the records. He said, I didn't like them. And, and Grisman hands them back to him and says, listen until you do.
Oh, that is so good.
Yeah, and
I love that.
It's hard to paint him into a box. His creativity was so expansive, and I just love that the idea about the liberation, because I mean he wasn't letting anything hold him down in terms of like tradition or format or anything like that. He's like, just if he was feeling energy, he would go for it. And sometimes his mandolin was out of tune or whatever, and sometimes it was gnarly, and just whatever. And then his action got so high in the '60s that that it forced him to play a complete different way. But it's it's all cool. But I love that the liberation found there, because and to me the last lesson of Monroe style is don't play like Bill Monroe.
Right.
Because he wasn't playing it like nobody. That's great.
Right. Totally, man.
Don't want to take too much more of your time. You've been really generous with your time, and but I am curious, where is your creativity leading you these days?
Well, good question. Sometimes I wonder the same thing myself, quite often probably. I'm kind of in conversation with the Hawktail folks right now about another project. We're thinking about doing an EP
Would this be album
thing.
third album?
Well, this would, I think, just be an EP.
Okay, gotcha.
We're trying to, well, mostly Paul is actually writing the music for this one.
Cool.
He just can't help himself, and so that's part of the idea, is that it would fit on a, I'm forgetting now the size of the vinyl, but it's like one of the smaller size, and it would be an A side, B side, but then also be like sort of equivalent to the length of an EP or whatever.
Very
So
cool.
that's an exciting conversation. But other than that, I'm just kind of trying to keep the engine warm over here and just get different sounds going in the hopper, and get on the axe as much as I can. So thanks for the interview here. It's always inspiring to hear you and to get a chance to talk with you, man.
You're so welcome. For those that yeah, thanks for doing it. For those that haven't checked out Formlessness into Form, I did an interview with Dominick in 2012, and it's part of a 4-part documentary series on creativity on YouTube, and Dominick and Phoebe are both featured in that, and so you can check that out. It's like 7 hours long. But you could, I love it because it's like it's beautiful people, it's got a lot of the heroes in it, and some folks that are not well known, but it's a lot of folks saying kind of stuff that we know, but it's just like reaffirming, and it's just kind of like peaceful, but there's some exciting moments in there, and if you're looking to draw, to kind of jumpstart your creativity, you might have a look at Formlessness into Form, and Dominick shares some really good thoughts there. Have you been do you play music with Phoebe a lot around the house, or yay nay?
We kind of go in phases of that for whatever reason. Phoebe's been really busy with this whole curriculum for the Ukulele Sprouts and a couple other things there. So she's mostly been up in the beehive, as we call it, working on that. And so we haven't been playing together a whole lot these days, but we actually, I think, just put a couple of little duo live streams on the calendar. So we'll keep you posted on those, and that'll give us a good excuse to practice.
Yeah, cool. So people can find that schedule on DominickLeslie.com.
Facebook? It's not up there at the moment, but by the time it's announced and official and everything, it'll hopefully be in all those places. Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, this has just been really fun, Dominick. I just appreciate, your good energy and goodwill towards the community, and your love of music, and how excellent you are with it, and your ability to talk about things that and relate them to a bluegrass audience, bluegrass mind, and would encourage anyone who wants to go deeper in those conversations to give Dominick an email, and that's in the chat right now. It's at the very top, and it's DominickLeslie@gmail.com. And so I'll just say a little quick prayer before we get off here. Holy Spirit, thank you for letting us all have this good visit here. Ask for consideration and blessing on all these folks here for the highest possible healing in their heart, body, mind, soul, and spirit, and all the good stuff and creativity flowing. And we give you all the glory for that. And thanks for letting the old technical side of things go well. And so we'll say, see you later, everyone. And thank you so much again, Dominick.
Namaste, y'all. Thanks so much.
Cheers, brother. Look forward to seeing you analog before too long.
All right. Likewise.
Bye, everybody.
Peace.